just so beautiful and so evocative. Well, I think we should start with maybe hearing what the story is. What is the inspiration for this piece?
So this is, back in 2013, in opera, in Houston Grand Opera, they have a series called Songs of Houston. And they contacted me to create a new opera because Houston is such a metropolitan city with a very diverse culture and multiple Asian race live there. And the theme for that year is on Vietnam. So they recommended Long to me as the librettist. So two of us actually met in the Grand Central. When Long came to
You're in New York.
Yes.
For the Houston story.
That's right.
Right. So he flew in, we met in Grand Central, and then we talked about story and ideas, and we had several ideas, and I'll let Long to tell you more about his background. But one thing at that time I was very interested in is because we know a lot about stories of fresh off the boat generation, first generation of immigrants came to this country, but what are their children who was born and raised here? What were their struggle and what were they thinking about? So at that year, we worked on this opera, and then later on I wrote An American Soldier, which is also along this same line. So at that time, Long suggested to me about this headline news, actually, which I also saw, just a while back, of Diane Tran, who was sentenced to prison to serve jail time because of she missed schools. In Texas, they have this law called truancy law. So she broke the law, and Long, maybe you could fill in the rest.
Sure. I'm actually mic'd up.
Great.
We talked a lot, like Huang said, some ideas, and this headline popped up. And it just made so much sense, right? This story of a second generation, and just this notion of having a story that is about not otherizing. So it made sense.
Maybe in case some people here don't know about this story, could you just briefly talk about what happened to her?
Sure. So Diane, honor roll student, was put in jail for missing schools, and she missed schools because she had to work 2 jobs. And in the interview that came out, the phrase that stayed with me was when she said, "I thought my family was happy." And we found out that her parents divorced, and she was the only child left to sort of take care of her brothers. Yeah.
I mean, it's just so powerful when you read these stories, because this girl was like an straight A student, honor roll, and had a full-time job, and in addition to the full-time job, had a half-time job.
That's right.
And would do all her studying, and then sometimes was too tired to go to school.
That's right.
So it's this, and it's such a combination of cultures.
Right.
It's
So she broke the truant law, and they she appeared in front of a juvenile court, and they put her in jail for missing schools.
And there's that amazing quote. Do you remember it from the judge about this is a land of laws?
That's right. And that's what the judge said was, this is a land of law, and if I allow one person to break the law, then it's chaos. So.
I mean, it just has such saliency. This was in 2012, and it has such saliency today.
And the reason the opera is called Bound also because we do want to treat each character with different angles, also to not just make one person look good, one person look bad, because I think that's not opera. So in that sense, each character is bounded to their own, dilemma. So in this case of the judge, who is bounded to the law of the land, and he actually, in the real life, he actually had a daughter, similar age to Diane, so he could relate to her, but he's the judge. He has to do what the law says. Yeah. And the mother in our opera, she's a first-generation immigrant who ran away from Vietnam.
That's right.
And so she was bounded by her trauma from her escape. Mm-hmm. So, and she left the family because enough is enough for her. And there is a character which is who's called Stanley, who's the laundromat boss, who asked Diane to work overtime. So he was bounded to greed and also to his own American dream.
That's right.
So he has to go to court to fight his divorce with his wife, and he has to have Diane to work harder to make more money in that sense. And for Diane, he was bounded to the family duty, to take care of the family, but also to his job. So each person doesn't have an easy way out, and that is life. And to me, I experienced that. I'm sure a lot of you also experienced that moment of you just can easily make a decision to say yes or no. They're more complicated than that.
And we're bound to our memories. We're bound to filial duties, to obligations, to so many things. And this story is actually, the only facts is that Diane was jailed. The rest is an imagination of the relationship between Diane and the mother, and the rest is really about the stories of being a refugee, which is my story, being an immigrant, and it's easy now to live in a world where we just disregard those stories, and I think storytelling after trauma allows survivors to get on a path toward healing, and that is important.
It's very important. Well, let's come back to this, but let's hear. I think you're going to read a little bit of the next excerpt, and then we'll hear it.
And this is where we meet Stanley, and this is the duet between Stanley and that's right. Stanley is the laundromat boss, and it's too long, so I'll just read a little excerpt between. So Stanley says, "You will amount to nothing if you fail at both things," referring to work and school. And then Diane says, 7 until 3 at school and 3 until 7 at work to support my brothers. What do I do but do what I do to put my family first?
So if we could hear this next excerpt is a pre-recorded piece, and we'll have a chance to hear Stanley's side. So before we get into each of your stories a little bit more, I think we're sort of in an incredible moment where opera doesn't just have to tell us the Puccini stories and these gigantic, epic love stories that are so European. They're telling very different kinds of stories, and yet still very much opera. So I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about that choice to use opera to tell this story, and what that process was for the two of you.
I always feel writing opera is a need. Mm-hmm. I feel I need to write it. It's not doing it for fun or doing it for other things, because it's such a hard labor to spend a year or two to create every note, vertically and horizontally. There must be a need to write opera. So to me, no matter, you mentioned Puccini, and of course this is very far away from Puccini, but there was always this movement of Verisma where life story became opera. That, I think, is a common theme. Yeah. And that is where the power of opera lays, is when people come to see opera, they want to be related, they want to connect. And when they see, yes, a love story, but they could feel that love, right? So in this case, although it's not a love story between lovers, but in a way it's a love story between a daughter and mother. So there is love in that, but also it's a real life drama. We look at our world today, although I wrote this in 2014, but you think about, okay, she was bullied by these laundromat boss, and in a way she is the suffering one, and she always has to fight for her voice, fight for her chance to be heard and to survive. So that is not a past tense story. That's very vivid today as well. So I always feel, there is the need to write opera, not because that is the headline of today, but because that story is, it has eternity to continue.
So Long, you're a poet, and words are your creative world, and you also come from the Vietnamese community. So from your standpoint, in terms of creating this work, tell us a little bit about your process.
Sure. Poetry is so insular and private. You can just take out a piece of paper and start writing, right? And so the process in working with Huang was this wonderful, deep collaboration. And that part that was just sung between Stanley and Diane, that was the hardest part to write, because there was a bit of comic note in there, and that was, the words were there, but they didn't come fully alive until we talked and you shaped it in the way you talked about how it should be sung. That's just so interesting to me. Poetry.
So that's a different process when you think of your words being sung.
Right, and poetry is really another. It's a form of storytelling, but there's musicality to it. It's not very far from opera. Opera is just a powerful way to tell a story, just deep respect to the composing and that kind of music attention, but poetry and opera is not that far apart. Yeah. It's just more expensive to do opera than it is to do poetry.
Well, I often said the best collaborator is, a librettist who writes poetically, but also has a great sense of drama. So, and your words really inspire me tremendously for this opera. And each opera I write is different. So in that sense, each librettist, they bring in their own personality, but also their own style. And that's the beauty of a collaboration.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's, I'm really curious whether Diane knew about the story, the real Diane, and whether the Vietnamese community also could relate to this.
Yeah, that's a good question. So Diane knew of the story, and we reached out to her, told her that we were going to write an opera, and we're going to take off on her story. And so while she knew about it, she was also applying to college. She wasn't at that time. She wasn't really interested, and we also didn't want it to be an interview. We didn't want it to be a reporting. We wanted it to be a dramatic story. And so the relationship between Diane and the mother, that is something that actually lived in my head, because the stories, the Khan story is pretty much the story of a lot of Vietnamese refugees. My parents' generation left Hanoi in 1954 when the Geneva Accord separated the two sides of the country. They lost everything then. And then in 1975, we were airlifted out of Saigon 2 days before the fall of that city. And so that story is not original. It's like a lot of Vietnamese refugee stories.
So you feel it very deeply as your own.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that when this was premiered in Houston, the community came out. It was a wonderful moment to have your story on stage. Yeah. Not my story, but really the story of the Vietnamese diaspora. And that's the power of art, right? At the end of the day, we want to see ourselves on the walls, on stage, written about. That's how we feel connected to the art, and so. Yeah.
And that's how opera stays alive.
That's exactly
really, by being relevant and being able to cross over into the new communities that are shaping it. So we have another excerpt, I think, and you're going to set us up for that?
Yes, this one is a duet between Khan and Diane, the mother and the daughter. And I think it's worth noting that the mother is not a real character. The mother is brought to life in the moment that Diane is in jail thinking about her mother. So the mother has left for some time now. So in here, there's a lot of repeated imageries of the blackbird, water, and stones. And in this duet, we get the sense of the connection between the mother and the daughter. Khan says, I forget, Diane, I try to forget. My leaving was a poison in my blood, a war wound. My leaving, please forgive me. And then you hear Diane later on says, your poison is in my blood too. I am bound to your leaving, bound to your sadness. And then Khan says, but the poison of leaving, all this leaving and the tearing down to nothing. We get the relationship between the mother and the daughter.
Oh, that's powerful. Let's hear the music.
I am here, I am try to forget. My living was a poison in my blood, a wound to my living. Forgive me, forgive me. Have I told you? You are nearly a woman. I try to forget when I was your age. So many nights since our rise up, clear it, leave it all. I was told. Have I told you? I know our history of lies. I know the sacrifices you laid down to bring me here. You've taught me many times. My father and mother forgotten on the hillside. I never buried them. Where are they now? Where are they tonight? Leave it all behind me. Left me. As I left everything in Vietnam, north and south forgotten, Hanoi to Da Nang forgotten. Don't you my hope for you, such light, but the poison of living is
So it's really exciting that you are now bringing this production to Baruch and have a second production and bring it here to New York. Tell us a little bit about that process and the production we're all going to see.
Yes, I will tell you very soon, but I just want to explain a little bit of what we just heard first, a little bonus point. So basically, the mother character for me, when I wrote that, I was imagining someone who is, traumatized still. So in her vocal line, you will hear her on and off, on and off. Yeah. So jumping up and down and discontinuously from time to time. And so that scene was she was trying to leave everything behind. And Diane, in this memory slip, she is trying to persuade her to stay. So that duet is about. So now just hearing them singing live, all these memories came back to me as well. So I have to let it out to share that with you. So yes, to your question, thanks to Fresh Squeeze Opera, and Lee is sitting here, and his partner in crime, Julian, who also is so supportive of this project, because as we all know, in New York, there are not too many opera houses. But the great thing is, because of that, a lot of smaller companies, it's like the grass after the rain, all growing. And we found each other, and we support each other, and they gave me a voice to be heard. So in this case, Bound will have its second production now. And we will give the New York premiere, and in collaboration with the Baruch Performance Center as well. So I think, of course, the story, the music, the words, everything will be the same, but different staging, different production. It will bring in new lights. For that, we engage a wonderful young director, Ashley Tada, and she is up and coming, very talented, and so she already present to us what her imagination of this production will be. So it will be quite different from the Houston version, but I think that's the beauty of opera.
You know, one of the things that's so exciting is this is such an American story, because I think what is American art forms is really being redefined every day by the people who live here, and the wonderful mix that becomes the new opera or the new art form of the country. And I know that you have explored that, Huang Ruo, with some of your other productions, like American Soldier. And being able to tell these, what are very emotional stories. One of the things I just wanted to take off on of what you just said, which had to do with the music writing. Because you just talked about the kind of emotion that is embedded in the musical lines that you wrote. So there's the libretto and there's the poetry, but there's also a parallel or contrasting story that's told through the music. And I'm wondering if there are other aspects of your music writing for this piece in particular that you feel has that kind of emotional storytelling.
Well, to me, I always like the idea of using music to create different character. But of course, the words inspire the music, so that's why we always have the words first. And this is an opera that is going. It goes backwards, right? So she is in a prison cell. She remembers what happened to her step by step. So music-wise, I always try to also bring back some certain elements, plant certain seeds. So I want the audience to experience, this kind of back and forth as well. So sometimes you feel, oh, that actually is so real happening in front of you, but sometimes you understand that actually is surreal as well. So in the original production, we have a Vietnamese instrument I also use called the Dan Bao. It's quite unique. It's a single string instrument. It's like someone is singing. So I use that instrument as the voice of Diane. So in the next scene where she is facing the judge, I created a monologue without words, just the Dan Bao playing throughout to have her voice, but she is singing different words to the judge. So there are actually 3 characters in that scene. One is a ghostly character of Diane as an observer, as she's being in the jail cell, but watching what happened between her argument and the judge. And then in real life, at the same moment, the audience will see that argument. So music could do that, interestingly, to create a multiple dimensional space and time.
But you mentioned that you started with the libretto. And did you start with this idea of we're going to start it, at the end in the jail scene and then go backwards? How did you decide what the sequencing would be?
That was deep collaboration. In fact, the original libretto was not in the order of the opera.
Do you remember what first?
It's been some years, but it wasn't definitely this. And in conversation, especially about music and the musicality and what music can do to help enhance the words, we decided that it's time going backward, and so it takes place in a jail cell, but everything else is memory. So yeah,
it's a little bit cinematic in a way, or dream-like.
Yeah.
Also, I think I remember that point we were talking about is because the story is so recent and so real, and same as An American Soldier, when I wrote American Soldier, was also only happened 1 year before. It's also hard to do a chronological order art form, stage work, right? So then people thinking, oh, this is not real. So in a way, stage itself is already abstract. So when you, in a way, to make the story become less narrative but more back and forth, actually it helps the audience to, it actually bring out certain things the audience could relate to. Emotion, that's one thing, and also the conflict of the drama, so that we are not watching from morning to the evening, that kind of timeline. So I found that works quite well in Bound as well, with this format.
Actually, because we want to end with music, we thought we'd take a moment now. I think I have a couple of people with microphones because we are live streaming. But if any of you have questions now that you'd like to ask, raise your hands. This is your moment with the creators.
I'm very compelled to share this. I rushed back from overseas to see Paradise Disrupted, and also rushed back to see, I went to St. Louis to see American Soldiers. So now the composers was really using all the headlines and also talk about American dreams, and also you use the word horizontally and vertically and dimensional music. And it's fantastic. Every opera sounded like totally different composer writing it, but it still has its own unique characteristics. So then you said you basically write it based on the libretto first. Now, that reminded me of something. Simonetta Puccini, who recently passed away, who's a granddaughter of Puccini, said, I have some issues with this opera. The opera is supposed to be composers' operas. Now it becomes the director's operas. Now it becomes librettist operas. So what is happening, because I'm really into operas, obviously. I travel all over the world just to see opera. At my day job, I go due diligence. At night job, I see everything. So what do you really see is happening with the chamber operas, and what would you like to see happen for the sort of like cultural exchange, East and West, and also the social commentary? I mean, I really find it fascinating, and on the other hand, I am kind of like not knowing, how would I say, I'm sort of losing my mind in a way to say, are we really getting away from Verdi's and Puccini's and Berlioz's and so forth into all of this Huang Ruo's opera?
Well, you asked many wonderful questions. I'm not sure I could all answer them correctly. I'm sure the granddaughter of Puccini, if she lived in her grandfather's time, she will see is this very much a composer's opera, and the key is the composer need to be alive. So once Puccini is long gone, then you have a Puccini opera is staged in the Mars, and or is staged in the you never know. So that's the beauty of a different production, right? So the director came in as a second-hand creator. But I think every composer should welcome that. I mean, Wagner might not welcome that when he wrote his Ring Cycle. However, I think that's the beauty of opera also is there's always new things in opera. Even the music and the words are there. And I hope no one will change Puccini because he's gone. But different staging will bring in different issue of the time. And I have seen very convincing productions of old operas, and I feel so new and so fresh and so related to. So to me, that is a great production. Back to your question to me, I think it's different time, true. I do compose a little bit differently from the past. For example, I wrote everything into the score. I don't do a piano short score. And that was the tradition when composers just do a piano score and vocal line, and then they reorchestrate it to orchestra. I wrote in the orchestra directly, and then I do my piano vocal score myself. I don't hire someone else to do it because I do feel the piano vocal score should be different from the orchestra score, but also should exist as an independent score. I very much welcome the collaboration of working with librettists, very hands-on from day one until the last note, because, and I'm sure there are composers like that in the past and also, so this is nothing new. But I love these ways of working because if I want to have a duet, if I want to have a chorus scene, and I could talk to my librettist, I say, look, we want to have many voices here. Can you create that? So instead of she or he finished the libretto and then I go back and say, oh, I'm so sorry, you spent all this time writing this, but I see this as 10 people singing instead of one person singing. So to me, just this way of working, I want to use this word dimensional again. It makes the stage work itself has more dimensions. It's not just singer singing to you from front to the back, but also it comes from all sides. But also in my orchestra, it informs the drama. It also, as what I explained to you about this ghost voice, so this kind of thing could happen because of a collaboration is very simultaneously. I also like to have, like when I wrote Paradise Interrupted, I work with the director who's the visual designer, also from the beginning onwards, and she actually created the artwork first. So in the past, you never think of how could a stage designer create a stage first and then write music for. But I love that kind of writing because I could be inspired by different things as well. So in that opera, I have Jen created the Black Garden, and Qian Yi, who I know I will write for her voice. So I become, a collaborator in that case. I always feel this is a very exciting time to write opera. So for that many reasons. Thank you for your questions.
I want to see Paradise disrupted, but how come it disappeared? I mean, I want to see it again.
It was interrupted.
No. Quentry.
Paradise never exists, right? Well, actually, we brought it to Asia now. So we just came back from Taiwan. We performed in Taiwan. We did a tour. And if everything goes well, cross fingers, and we will perform in the Macau festival in Macau in the fall, and then in Shanghai, and yeah. So it will have a live, and yes, I hope you will come back to New York again.
Terrific. Thank you.
Thank you for
Another question.
Hi, my name is Colleen Verbis. I'm the marketing manager at Baruch Performing Arts Center. I don't really have a question, but I wanted to bring something to attention that everyone with their program has a flyer from us in there that gets you a discount code to see Bound at Baruch Performing Arts Center, which is actually April 13th to the 18th. So there's 5 productions. The tickets are $26 with the promo code PREVIEW, and it expires March 31st, so please be sure to get your tickets with the special discount as soon as you can.
Thank you.
That's all.
In the back there.
Hello. I want to ask a couple of things. First one, which is the instrumentation of this opera? Which instruments did you use? And also, if you use any folk elements from Vietnam or other folk elements. And last thing I would be curious about is if you had any composer that work as a reference for you in opera that you feel close to them or you were inspired of. Thank you.
Thank you.
So one part of it was, is there any folk reference in the work itself? And the second, who are composers that have inspired you? Was there a third that I missed? Oh, and on the instrumentation.
Yes. For this opera, we have 7 instruments, and if I name them all, there's a flute, clarinet, trombone, there's piano, and also there is a violin, cello, and dan bao, that's the Vietnamese instruments. And for tonight, I specially arranged this version of piano and bassoon, because the bassoon is very special to me. And that is, one thing is I want this story to be a personal story. So it's not a collage story in that sense. So it's not an obvious quotation of certain folk song or anything from Vietnam or from Asia. But I do feel that the multiculturalism does come through in the music. In fact, in Diane's case, I also created certain. If you see the entire opera, there are certain. Very uplifting, young people's music you will hear, no matter what, could be rock music or pop music, which will come in, and I've orchestra do all kind of slides, and the vocal line, the next extra you will hear a little bit as well. So to me, it's very subtle. It should not come as artificial. It should come as internal. If it's there, it's there. You should not notice it too obviously. But again, it's it's a very personal story told by voices, yeah? And then there's another question, which is, did I answer them all? Who inspired me? Always very hard to answer this question, but the hardest one is, what's your style? So this is the second hardest question. I grew up with Chinese opera, and my grandmother, who doesn't know, she never been to school or doesn't write any characters, but she loved opera, so she took me to see operas when I was little, in villages, So my training is more drama form in Chinese opera, and then I came to States in the 90s. I start seeing Western opera live, and then I try to find the common ground and find the contrast. But I think. To me, what really inspired me, I could name composers who I really admire. Of course, I love Verdi, I love Wagner, I love Handel, who's great, Monteverdi, all these great composers. But I don't intentionally try to write like any of them, because again, each story is different, right? I'm not writing Aida or writing Madame Butterfly. I do believe story also inspire them to write differently. If Puccini is not writing Madame Butterfly or no Turandot, he would write a different opera, use different materials. So, yes, story affected my writing, but also the language. Now, for some of you who have heard my Dr. Sun Yat-sen or Paradise Interrupted, which both written in Chinese, my vocal language are different. And when you hear Bond or An American Soldier, they are in English. So the language should be a deciding factor as well. Certain things should not work in, for example, in English, we have this beautiful, endings like this kind of thing. In Chinese, we don't have that kind of thing. So a note could last very long. We could let the note just continue soaring. So a simple line could be 10 minutes long. But in English, that's why I do feel there's a lot of, a lot of opera in English are very almost like speaking, almost like talking. Because if you don't create a tempo too fast, then people might not understand it. So for me, I try to find somewhere in between. My taste is not necessarily like a talking, like musical, that kind of language, but I also want to bring in my cultural background and style to really make the words heard, but also contain the beauty of the language itself as well.
So now I'm thinking about the poetry and to what extent that your poetry, because that's a big jump. And is your poetry only written in English?
Yes, yes.
So what was that leap? I mean, it doesn't matter whether it's only English. Going from poetry to a sung libretto is like a different language in certain ways. So
but in fact, what's interesting is that many of the imagery and the cadence have already existed in my poetry. It's really the way that the attention is about the mother. I write a lot of mother poetry. So so it worked. Yes,
it was an easy.
Yes.
Well, I think we're at the point. Can you set us up now for the last excerpt?
Yes. So this is Diane considering what is her American dream, and here she talks about. This is the moment right before she conjures up her mother. This is before her mother appears. I am marked by bad luck, abandoned by mother, forgotten by father. Here I am, I'm a blackbird, a sinking stone, a truant or a beggar. And she ends with mẹ ơi, which is a plaintive crying of where is my mother? Where's my mother?
Which means mother.
Mother, yeah. Mẹ ơi means mother. Oh, mother, yeah.
So let's end our evening with music.
So, this is my American dream. What do I do? How do I choose? If I miss one more day of school, I'll work insurance, see trouble.
What a great joy to hear this in this hall. It's your music just comes alive here, and I can't wait to see the production, and really feel the opera in its totality.
Thank you, Rachel. And I just want to say, Asian Society is my founding ground of opera. We did a Dr. Sonia Sen presentation here and enabled me to have an American premiere with Santa Fe Opera and Paradise Interrupted. So happy to come back here again. And thank you.
We really want to be able to champion your work and the work that I think is so important, and particularly for this season, which is Asian American. And I think at this time, the idea of, what is American, quote unquote, music? Well, this is American music, and at the same time, it's part of a global history. So I'm really delighted that you could be here. Thank you so much for your generosity, all of you, in sharing. And we have our marching orders. So thank you all.
Thank you all
Please
for
join
coming.
me in thanking
Thank
the
you.
artists.